So welcome everybody, and welcome to the second RideWise and Green Leadership Hub Sustainable Jersey webinar, Walkability and Bikeability Part 1 Audits. I'm Sarah Catherine, Community Outreach Coordinator for RideWise, and I'm excited to welcome you all here today. Today's webinar is part 1 of a 2-part series that focuses on walkability and bikeability audits and plans. Walkability and bikeability are important aspects in making communities livable and safe for everybody, and are often the first steps when working on complete streets and ensuring that streets and sidewalks are safe and easy to use for all users. We have a great group of speakers today who I'm excited to introduce in a couple of minutes, who are going to focus on audits, discussing what audits are and how to do them, and also highlighting initiatives that have been happening recently within Somerset County. So before we start, I'll just go over a few quick housekeeping items. Wait for the slide to change. There we go. So as an attendee, you are muted, but if you have questions during our panelists' presentations, feel free to enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be having the Q&A at the end of the webinar after everybody's presentations, so we'll try to get to everyone's questions as best we can. During our Q&A, you can also raise your hand to ask a question. And also at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat box and your audio settings. We've got some great speakers today, and I'm very excited to introduce them and for their presentations. We've got James Sinclair, Research Manager at the New Jersey Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, Angela Knowles, Director of Planning Services for Van Cleef Engineering Associates, and Walter Lane, Director of Somerset County Planning. Thank you each for joining us today. To start off the webinar, I'm just going to do a brief introduction of RideWise, who we are, what we do, and how we can help with Sustainable Jersey actions. And then we'll be moving more into our panelists' presentations. For those of you who may not be familiar with RideWise, we are an independent nonprofit organization that is dedicated to promoting and advocating for transportation choices that are efficient, safe, and sustainable. And one of the ways that we do this is by engaging with municipalities and helping them with Sustainable Jersey actions. So what Sustainable Jersey actions can RideWise help with? We can help with many of the actions that fall under land use and transportation, health and wellness, and energy transportation initiatives. In this webinar and next week's webinar, myself and our panelists will be discussing the actions that fall under land use and transportation, specifically bicycle and pedestrian audits and bicycle and pedestrian plans. So this week we'll be talking about audits, and then next week we'll be talking more about plans. James is going to go into more detail about the specifics of walkability and bikeability audits, but as a quick introduction, audits are assessments of existing conditions for bicyclists and pedestrians in your community, and are often the first step in creating bicycle and pedestrian plans. They often include a survey of the existing infrastructure conditions and a description of opportunities and areas for improvement. In terms of Sustainable Jersey points, you can earn 5 points for just a bike audit or just a walk audit, or you can earn 10 points for a complete audit. RideWise can help with audits pretty much from start to finish, by organizing public outreach and meetings, mapping out an audit route, and leading members of the public, municipal staff, and volunteers on the audits themselves. We've done this with numerous Somerset County communities and schools in the past, including the borough of Raritan, which is where the picture from the bottom comes from, and is also what Angela is going to be highlighting in her presentation. And we've also provided municipalities with checklists to help them identify issues on their own, if they prefer. And you can also find similar walk audit sheets at AARP, which is the link that I've included at the bottom of this slide. And I think that's a good segue into James' presentation on how to conduct audits. So James, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then you can take it away. And as a reminder to all our attendees, if you have any questions, we'll be doing the Q&A at the end. So you can put your questions in the Q&A box or in the webinar chat. As we continue.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. And let me just get the screen thing right. And you see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Great. Thanks. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Sinclair. And like Sarah mentioned, I'm going to talk about walk audits, what they are, why they're useful, and how to conduct one. So quick agenda for my presentation, and the introduction, and then what are walkability and bikeability audits? Why should you conduct a walkability and bikeability audit? How to conduct a walkability and bikeability audit, and the next steps when you're done with one. So just a little quick background about myself. I work at the New Jersey Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, which is based out of the Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers. The New Jersey Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, also known as BPRC, assists public officials, transportation and health professionals, and the public in creating a safer and more accessible walking and bicycling environment. We do this through primary research, education, and dissemination of information about best practices in policy and design. The center is supported by the New Jersey Department of Transportation through funds provided for the Federal Highway Administration. So please visit us at njbikeped.org for more information about the work we do in New Jersey. All right, so what are walkability and bikeability audits? The point of a walk and bike audit is to make walking and bicycling safer in your community. They're great tools to help municipalities, schools, parents, students, businesses, and the community at large identify barriers that may make it difficult or dangerous to walk or bicycle around town. They primarily work by examining existing conditions to determine what is working and what we should change. We then try and understand the behavior of road users and also think about the behaviors that we might want to change. Finally, a walk audit ends by identifying potential improvements, and the end result is to take these findings from the audits and start to make those changes. So to step back for a minute, why do we care about those things, aside from getting those sustainable Jersey points? And the reason is that there are many benefits to walking and biking. These include getting people moving, which improves health, provides connections to local destinations, creates more livable communities, reduces traffic congestion and reliance on carbon fuels, thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions, provides a low-cost travel option both for individuals and the city, improves safety for all roadway users, and creates mobility options for those who cannot or will not drive due to age or ability. And in this side, safety is highlighted because it's really key. We want to make sure everyone is safe, and improving safety also encourages other people to walk and bike who may not be doing so currently because they're worried about their own safety based on the current conditions. So how do walkability audits actually help us achieve those goals? Well, the key is that design affects what we do and how we do it. So the photo on the top is in Somerset County, and you need to ask yourself, does that look like a place where you want to walk, bike, or drive? And so the way we design things, if you build for cars, you get cars, but if you build for people, you get people. In many cases, it's immediately obvious what isn't pedestrian-friendly design. So does anyone really want to walk on a street that looks like this? So what a walk audit does is catalog or inventory what makes the existing environment unsafe or unattractive for walking or bicycling so we can make the improvements. That is, you can't fix something that you don't know if you don't know what needs fixing. Additionally, the design of our road affects how people behave on them. Why do drivers speed? Well, because they can, because the design of the road is telling them that it's fine to drive very quickly. Why do bicyclists bike on the sidewalk? It's probably because they don't feel safe on the roadway. Why don't joggers use the sidewalk? It's likely because the surface isn't evening and they're worried they'll sprain an ankle. Why do pedestrians cross mid-block? It might be because the way the intersection is designed makes them feel unsafe and they feel safer crossing away from it. Okay, so how do we get started in conducting a walk or bike audit? The first step is to identify a location. We want a corridor that has destinations people want to bike or walk to. Obvious ones include schools, business districts, or civic buildings like the library, rec center, or city hall. Other popular destinations are parks and transit stations. Does your town have a severe parking shortage by the train station or downtown? Making it safer and more comfortable for locals to walk there is going to be a lot cheaper than building a new parking deck. The next step is identify who owns the roadway. If it's a municipal roadway, it'll be easiest to make those changes quickly. If it's a county roadway, it's critical you work with the county because they're the ones that have to approve and make any changes. If it's a state route, NJDOT is going to prefer to send out their own consultant teams, so the best bet is to work with your own elected officials to make it happen sort of from the top down. The next step is to choose the length of the corridor. You really want a reasonable length. When we do walk audits, we try to limit them to about half a mile at a time. And that's because it ends up being a mile as you want to walk one way and then walk all the way back on the other side of the road. This takes about 60 to 90 minutes. You can do longer, of course, but then you need to make sure the other team, is able to walk those distances and has the time to do so. Or you can split it up among multiple days. Speaking of a team, who do you want on your team? While it's possible to conduct an audit all alone, the most effective ones have different people representing various organizations and viewpoints. If you want implementation to happen, it's best to get the City Hall on board early. Besides the planners and engineers, someone from the police department might have the knowledge of where the crashes are happening. The Public Works Department can tell you if they have the capacity to quickly make changes. Elected officials, of course, can help to prioritize the improvements. If a school is part of the route, then you should work to get various voices from there. And they can include students too, especially if they're the ones walking to school. Of course, local residents and business owners should be involved as they walk or drive through the audit area every single day so they can tell you what's going on, how people are behaving. They'll have plenty to say about where they feel it's safest or most dangerous to walk or bike. If you have other key destinations in mind, like a major hospital or library, reach out to them as well and try to get someone from those organizations on the team. And of course, don't forget your local TMA like RideWise, as they're the experts in the field and they can really help you put this together. A good audit team is about 8 to 20 people. There's no set size, but if you go too big, it's a little difficult to get everyone on one page walking. So the next step is to pick a time and a day. The key you want to observe is typical behavior. So think about the busiest time on the corridor you're looking at. So if there's a school involved, that's school dismissal time. But if it's a downtown business district, maybe you care about the lunch rush. If there's a train station, maybe it's the morning rush hour that's got the biggest issues. In some cases, it could even be a weekend. If you have a park that's host to multiple soccer games, baseball games that are drawing people from all over, that might be something you want to keep in mind. So unless there's special events like that, typically Tuesday to Thursday are the best days of the week to observe. They tend to be the most normal days traffic-wise. In some cases, you might be really concerned with the challenges that come at dusk or nighttime, so it might make sense to schedule it later in the day. Or optionally, you might want to conduct a second night-focused audit. If you live in a beach town, you probably want to conduct an audit in the summer. However, it's always important to think about what conditions are like in the winter, thinking about snow and those challenges as well. So just a quick note about bikeability audits. You can take into account bikeability when conducting a walk audit. It's very easy to combine the two, and everything we just talked about previously is valid when conducting a bike audit. However, if you're really focused on bikeability, it makes the most sense to get people on a bicycle and see the corridor on a bike. One advantage is this allows for a longer corridor to be studied, and it really provides you a lot more information on what the biking challenges are. You'd be surprised at how much steeper a road feels on a bike than walking, for example. Or like in this photo, the rail tracks are a hazard on a bike, but it's something you may not think about when you're walking by. It is important to note that many of your stakeholders may not be able to attend a bike audit just because of ability. So it might make sense to do a bike audit as a separate add-on piece, maybe with a smaller team. So what do you need to conduct an audit? Once you have your date, time, location, and team assembled, you only need to bring a few materials with you. The first is an audit form. So there's a huge range of audit forms that you could download from the internet created by many organizations. We use the one we create. The one here from AARP is pretty popular as well. Some of these audit forms are super simple, maybe a couple sheets of paper, while there's some of them are out there are really detailed, pretty much a book. But what really matters is that everyone is using the same one and that it's easy to fill out as you walk. So that being said, don't forget your pens and clipboards. Clipboards are helpful. Camera is really key. You need photos to refer back to later and include in any report. And in many cases, the photos can be the centerpiece of your report. If you're auditing at dusk or at night or in an area without sidewalks, you need to consider your own safety. So that means bringing safety vests, reflective clothing, or lights so drivers can see you. There are a lot of things that you can measure along an audit. A tape measure will quickly let you determine how wide a sidewalk is. Other tools such as a speed radar don't hurt if you happen to have one with you. And while not equipment, you want to designate group leaders to keep everyone moving together. If you have more than 10 people, split up into smaller groups so it's easier to navigate the corridor. Usually we do, on both sides of the street, and then we switch sides when we do ours. So a quick word about photos. While it's important to show a problem, context is very valuable. When looking at these photos, do you really remember where they were taken? Really, no. So you want to take a lot of photos to grab the context and avoid super close-ups because you want some scale. Sometimes bringing a ruler can help to measure deficiency. If you have a steep gap, you want to show it's 4 inches or whatever. As you take photos, you might want to jot down addresses or take photos of signs and addresses so you can remember where you were when you're looking over your photos later. With a digital camera, there's really no such thing as too many photos. Okay, so now we have everything we need, and the next step is to go out and start writing down what these existing conditions are. That means for a walk audit, evaluating the sidewalks, intersections, roadways, lightings, and other conditions that affect how comfortable or safe it is to walk or bicycle. And again, we want to look at things that are working well and things that need improvement. And as one note, while most of the focus will be on traffic safety, this is also a great opportunity to look at safety related to crime and identify other problems like graffiti, littering, or drug use, etc. This is called CEPDED, which is Crime Prevention for Environmental Design. And some audit forms will include spaces for this, but others don't. So just decide beforehand if that's something you want to include in your audit, since you're already doing it. Why not? So as you're looking at the conditions, remember that our streets need to be usable by everyone, and that includes those with disabilities. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, sets rules on how to design public spaces to be accessible. So again, ever see someone in a wheelchair using the street when there's a sidewalk right there? And it might be because there's problems with the way the sidewalk is designed. So just as some quick basics, sidewalks need to be at least 36 inches for wheelchairs, but the standard is usually 5 feet. And wider is even better so people can walk side by side. You need to also remember that the sidewalk usable width is less if it's next to a wall or a busy travel lane. So as you conduct the audit, think about those in wheelchairs. Is it wide enough? Is there a slope? Are there obstructions, cracks, steps, open drains? And also think about how the blind navigate. Are there protruding objects overhanging in the sidewalk, for example, that they might walk into? Every intersection can present a serious challenge for the disabled. So you need to look at the ramps. Are they built properly, oriented the right way? And you don't need to be an engineer or memorize the standards to immediately spot a ramp that doesn't look quite right, like the one on the left in that first photo, which is sloped wrong, and then there's an island in the middle that people can't get through. So ramps should always face the crosswalk, can't be too steep, must have a smooth transition at the asphalt, and they should have truncated domes, which are those yellow bumpy strips, which are there so to let the blind know that they're about to enter a roadway. Maintenance is key, so even if the sidewalk or roadway were originally built correctly, it may no longer be accessible due to degraded maintenance. Is the surface smooth? Are there other issues like exposed drainage that can trap wheels, both bike wheels or wheelchair wheels? So during the audit, you need to record all these issues. Driveways can be problematic. Steep grades and cross slopes can be hazardous for all users, but again, particularly those in wheelchairs. So as you walk down the corridor, think about what it would feel like to walk on a slanted sidewalk with a stroller wheelchair where the slope is constantly pushing you into the roadway. So the best practice at driveways is for the sidewalk to continue straight across the driveway. And when you're crossing driveways, again, observe how drivers are entering and exiting. Are they speeding? Are they stopping for pedestrians? And finally, comfort is also key to encourage walking. So which ones you end up installing depends on the context. But the more comfortable it is to walk, the more likely people will walk. So that includes things like, again, width, so people can walk together, having shade, could include canopies or trees, seating, lighting, other amenities. Intersections, again, are very dangerous places. And if people don't feel safe crossing the street, they're not going to walk at all. One of the quickest and low-cost ways to improve safety is to increase the visibility of pedestrians by upgrading the crosswalk striping. Top one is standard, middle one is continental, the bottom one is ladder. The more paint, the higher visibility, and just for a very small added additional cost. Another concern at intersections is visibility with parked cars. State law prohibits parking within 25 or 50 feet of an intersection because it blocks visibility. So you need to see our drivers illegally parking too close to the corner, and is the behavior happening because the design allows them to do so. So just a quick real world example, there's actually a pedestrian right here about to cross the street, but you can't even see them. So there are different treatments you can do, like bike corrals to make sure that visibility is clear, or sidewalk extensions, which range from very low cost temporary ones to more expensive but more aesthetically pleasing ones. When you think about bicycles, designing for bicycles means reducing conflict, creating visibility, and establishing clear guidelines on right of way. So that's what you need to really think about when thinking about biking. And during the audit, you want to determine if there are ways in which to add dedicated space for bicyclists. There's a variety of bicycle infrastructure improvements that are available. I'm just going to talk quickly about the bicycle lanes, which are spaces only for bikes, and you need 4 feet if next to a curb or 5 feet next to street parking. But just like sidewalks, wider is better. And other options include shared lanes, bicycle boulevards, protected bicycle lanes, and shared use paths. So if you don't have enough space for a bike lane, there might be other alternatives to give bikes a safe way to travel. And when conducting a walk audit, you're going to walk past bus stops. Don't ignore them. All those riders are getting there on foot. So things to consider are they accessible to people in wheelchairs? Is there a shelter? Is it lit up at night? In the winter, is it being maintained? And is there enough space for both people waiting and people walking by? While most audits are conducted during the day, it's important to remember that day and night conditions can differ dramatically. And lighting is not only a safety issue in terms of visibility, but it also improves security if you're thinking about the crime aspect as well. And the time is about to change. It's going to start getting dark at 5 p.m. So lighting is really key. And the lighting conditions can feel very different as a pedestrian versus as a driver. Street lighting comes in many shapes, sizes, colors, and brightness. And it's also important to think about what kind of lighting exists. The one on the left is very popular in New Jersey, but you're really lighting up the sky instead of the roadway. So that's something to consider, even if there's already ample lighting. When it comes to proposing improvements, there's some great resources you can refer to. The NJDOT Complete Streets Design Guide is a great place to start. It's very easy to navigate, covers a lot of ground, and the best part, it's approved by NJDOT. NACDO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, has a great website on street designs and bike guides, and it's a very great resource to use. And Somerset County has a design book, which I believe Walt will talk about, and that's a really great resource as well. So these guides go into great detail on what kind of interventions you can put in to slow down speeding cars, make intersections safer, or provide bicycle accommodations. And finally, so once you've conducted your audit and you've met together as a group to talk about your findings, you need to put it into a report. So these should include all your existing conditions with photos, and it should identify and prioritize changes. Some of these changes can be made quickly by the town as part of the regular business. Things like trimming a tree branch, disblocking a stop sign, replacing a missing sign, or restriping a crosswalk. Other changes, let's say like adding a bicycle lane or adjusting lane widths, can be done pretty much for free if they're planning on repaving the roadway soon. So it's great to have that on the books. So when that project goes through, those improvements are put in as part of that process. And some suggestions, like maybe adding a traffic signal or building a sidewalk, are going to be long-term and might require grant funding. But the great news is that this report is the base of that grant application. You've identified the problems and solutions, and that's really important when it comes to applying for those state or federal funds. So there's no set design for a useful report, but we do have some examples of walk audits we've done ourselves on our website, including one in Bernardsville last year that was funded by the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. And we're doing a few more this year as well that we plan on releasing before the end of the year. So thank you. I hope I was able to cover what you needed to know about walk audits. If you have any additional questions we don't cover today, feel free to send me an email or visit our website, and we'll definitely be around to help answer those questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, James. I think that was a really great overview of audits and things and the specifics of doing an audit and what to look for and things like that. So that's really great. Next, we're going to go into Angela's presentation, which is kind of a case study on some audits that we did in Raritan last summer. So take it away, Angela.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Let's see. There we go.
While you do that, I'm just going to say quickly that James brought up a very good point about the pictures. I remember that picture taking was a big part of our audits in Raritan with Angela. And Angela will talk more about it, but the clipboards and things, we've also been experimenting with trying to do like a mobile app through ArcGIS for people who prefer to do things on their phone instead of a clipboard. But it's always great to have the clipboard and the paper as well for people who aren't as tech savvy. There's always bugs with apps and things. So a good old-fashioned camera and clipboard is also very important. And I'm excited to hear Angela's presentation more about that. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Again, my name is Angela Knowles. I'm a planner with Van Cleef Engineering Associates, and I represent a number of communities in central New Jersey. One of them is Raritan Borough in Somerset County. And so we've partnered with RideWise last summer. We were just saying how I can't believe it's been a year and a half since we did this. But it was a great experience, and I'm just going to tell you our experience with it and how we went about doing it. I want to just give a little background about Raritan's bike and pedestrian safety planning history, sort of how this all came about. This was really part of a larger project, which was updating the town's circulation plan element, which had last been looked at in 2003. So, you know, things have been changing in the area, demographics changing, riderships of the train and buses and everything. And so we wanted to take a look at the circulation plan element as a whole and do some updates that way. The town has also been very fortunate in receiving some grant funding through a variety of different sources for different transportation projects. So in 2017, we were awarded a $1 million grant from NJDOT to look at specifically the corridor from our train station to the riverfront. If you're familiar with the borough, has access to the Raritan River. And then sort of in between the railroad and the river is the main street, Somerset Street. So looking at sort of connecting those areas. We also worked with Somerset County in the supporting priority investment project. So all the different phases of that. Again, that area of town was one of the areas that was specifically looked at in Somerset County. We were awarded an Emerging Centers grant, which is looking at economic development on Somerset Street, which is also including bicycle and pedestrian safety. We did a Street Smart pedestrian safety campaign in 2018 over the summer. And then this specific project for the updating of the circulation plan element was a grant from the Regional Center Partnership. And anything that we've been doing, we've been in communication with the county on the walk, bike, hike plan to just make sure that everything that we're recommending is consistent with the recommendations in that plan and that framework. So this just a history to kind of show how what I'm talking about here sort of ties into all of this. So the first step in our audit process was to create our bike and pedestrian safety subcommittee, which was a subcommittee of the Land Use Board. It included a variety of members from the Borough Council, the Land Use Board, Environmental Commission, and Green Team. We also brought in some folks, some residents from town who are bicycling advocates. And then, of course, we also worked with our RideWise staff, which you know, is always beneficial to have them on board with this kind of stuff. So, you know, we had a kickoff meeting. We talked about what walkability audits are, what the purpose of this is, how it fit into the larger picture of the circulation plan element. And so they really sort of spearheaded this whole project and helped to move it forward. So the way that we did this, and this is because this is how it worked for Raritan, and it might work differently for your town. We didn't focus so much on one specific corridor, but we wanted, because we were looking at it from a comprehensive circulation plan perspective, we wanted to get a feel of what the issues and challenges and opportunities were in sort of each of the neighborhoods of the borough. And it has a variety of different types of neighborhoods. And so what we might recommend for one area might not make sense for another area. So we really wanted to be kind of specific about our recommendations. So we split the town into quadrants, and looking at this map, you can see that sort of at the northeastern diagonal there is Route 28, and then the town is bisected by Route 202. And then we have the railroad tracks, which is sort of the border of 3 and 4 here. And then we have the Raritan River to the south. And we also have 206 coming up here. So we have a lot of interesting things happening. Our neighborhoods are not necessarily connected. The north to the south are not necessarily connected. We have major highways going through, which pose their own pedestrian and bicycle safety concerns, because people do use those routes for commuting and for accessing different parts of town. And so what we did is our subcommittee broke up into these different quadrants. We sort of picked one person from each of those different quadrants to be our neighborhood captain, and to sort of facilitate the different neighborhood meetings in each of those neighborhoods. We announced all of the meetings at once, so we were going to hold one a week. It was ambitious. Thankfully, we were lucky with the weather, and I think only one of the meetings had to be rescheduled because of rain. But for the most part, we had really good turnouts for each of the meetings. And we had the sort of the same process for each one, which I'll go through. But basically, we had a little presentation of bike and pedestrian safety components. The RideWise staff talked about what we should be looking for. They had the clipboards, they had the safety vests, they had the pens, and we did walk around and take pictures of the different neighborhoods. So and then at the end, we sort of discussed what we saw, what we learned, where we think we could recommend improvements. And so all of that then went into the plan, which I'll be talking about next week. So this is an example of one of the meetings. This is just a picture of our bike train that goes through the southern part of the town, where every Tuesday a group of kids with adults get together and they sort of pick up each other along the route to the elementary school. But in looking at this one neighborhood in particular, the neighborhood captains there had sent out a flyer to their neighbors. We did post on the town's website, the town's Facebook page. But what we found really worked too is that we put flyers in people's mailboxes in every neighborhood that we were going to be walking around, so that if they weren't able to make it to the walking tour, they could email their comments and their experiences and their thoughts on things directly to us, so we could include them. So this was just an example of what one of the flyers looked like for one of the neighborhoods. Just kind of gives a little bit of why we're doing this, what it is. It's a reason to get out and talk with your neighbors and figure out, maybe come together and recommend some solutions. So that was that was this neighborhood here. This was quadrant 1. Which, as I said, all of these neighborhoods have sort of different typologies. This neighborhood has somewhat larger lots than some of the other neighborhoods in town. It's also directly adjacent to Janssen Pharmaceutica and directly across from Ortho McNeil, the other pharmaceutical company. Access to this neighborhood really is from Route 202, but people use it as a cut through because just north of the border there is Bridgewater, Vanderveer Road, I believe. And so a lot of folks use this as a cut through and speed through these, even though they have these what would appear to be very dangerous right turn curves. It doesn't seem to stop people from speeding through the neighborhood. So what we did is we went through, walked from one end to the other, noting where there were path obstructions, where there were existing crosswalks, and then where there were existing sidewalks. And this was really the method that we had for each of the different neighborhoods. So I'm just going to scroll through quickly each of the different neighborhoods so you can kind of see just the variety of issues in these. So in this neighborhood, which as you can see down towards the bottom right, there is a Somerville Circle. You know, folks in these neighborhoods have said that they want to be able to walk to the shops there, but walking on Route 28 is not safe. We noticed that there were a lot of path obstructions along First Avenue here. If you look at this neighborhood, you know, we have existing sidewalks here on some of the streets, and then no crosswalks anywhere else throughout the neighborhood. Folks on this side of the neighborhood would love to be able to cross over to this park here. But again, because of the lack of crosswalks and other obstructions, this happens to be First Avenue sort of peaks at a hill, so it's very hard to see pedestrians if they were crossing. So there's a lot of different issues happening here in this neighborhood. In this neighborhood, this was our quadrant number 3. This is mainly the downtown area, so we're getting into a little bit more denser housing. We have our train station right in the middle here. We have the riverfront down here, and then we have downtown Raritan, Somerset Street right across. So here we saw a lot of things like uneven sidewalks, mainly because of tree roots and things like that. There were a lot of crosswalks. Some of this neighborhood up here had actually just been redone with ADA compliant curb ramps, new sidewalks and crosswalks. So some of that all looked pretty good. What we noticed was crossing over the train station was really difficult. What we also did, you know, James had mentioned thinking about access for wheelchairs and folks, you know, that might use canes or things like that. We actually walked around with a baby stroller because, you know, there's a lot of families in these neighborhoods that walk everywhere with their kids and have strollers with them. And so it was important to see what it would feel like to be a mom with kids or a dad with kids walking around to go to the library and, you know, having to cross over a storm grate right in front of the library that, you know, didn't provide very good access there for a baby stroller. So we did that, and that seemed to work really well for us because again, it just sort of gives you a different perspective. So going into the last neighborhood here, this is our the one elementary school in the town is here, JFK, and then we also have LabCorp here. So we have some commercial industrial area, a lot, again, sort of denser neighborhoods here. A school where they don't provide busing, so a lot of folks, you know, drive their kids to school. But then, as I mentioned, there was also the bike train, which actually comes down Johnson Drive, down Weiss Terrace, and then over. So that was also something that our bike advocates were really focused on, was the ease of navigating those sidewalks and roadways if you know, if the roadways weren't safe and they had to bring the kids onto the sidewalks, you know, how did that work? So again, you know, a lot of obstructions here, mostly in this area. It was a lot of stormwater damage for cracking pavement, cracking sidewalks and things like that. So so creating like potholes almost on a lot of the different intersections there. Again, this neighborhood was also recently redone with new ADA ramps. So so a lot of those seemed okay, but you know, there were still a lot of obstructions there. So after we went through all of our quadrants, and this is the whole town, we had this nice big map of everything all on one map. Oh, sorry, this is just some pictures of our walking tour. And so we were looking for things like with the baby stroller, you know, a cracked sidewalk like this might not be bad for someone just walking by. But, you know, obviously, if you're pushing a stroller, now it forces you to go out into the street to kind of maneuver around that. Folks here having to you know, bend down a little bit there to miss, you know, miss that branch there, get out of the way of that branch. So that was something else that we had talked about was, you know, responsibility of maintenance, really, like whose responsibility is it to maintain that vegetation? Is it the homeowner's responsibility to cut that back? Is it the town's because it's technically hanging over the sidewalk? So these were some recommendations that we made that we should have some sort of guidance on this for property owners. And then, as I mentioned, in that one neighborhood, there was a lot of stormwater. You could see where, you know, over time it had worn away at the roadway there. So so those are just some examples of some pictures that we took. We took a lot more than this, but they're just an example. So then what we did is we met after our subcommittee met after we had all of the walkability audits, and went back through and kind of said, okay, where do we think we could see improvements here? Where there were missing sidewalks, where should we have new sidewalks? Where do they need to be repainted maybe? Where do we potentially see new connections? There's in this neighborhood, there happens to be this townhouse development that there's this park here, but there's no improved path or anything. You know, in order for the folks here to get into this neighborhood right now, they have to walk up and around. So we're trying to look for ways to kind of make connections a little bit easier for some of the neighborhoods. We also included some recommendations like traffic calming areas. So, you know, again, as I had mentioned, folks tend to speed through this roadway, even though it would appear to be dangerous to do that. So, you know, we had recommended some traffic calming strategies for those areas. And then also, you know, working with our neighbors, the industries that are nearby. All of this black existing sidewalk is a walking trail for the employees of Janssen. So our thought was, well, is there a way that we could maybe partner with them to make more connections for people in this neighborhood to get across 202 to other neighborhoods, or even maybe continue through the site, maybe some sort of easement that the public would be able to use. So those are some of the recommendations that we made here. As you can imagine, we suggested more sidewalks, all of the yellow sidewalks there, and then the red crosswalks especially along First Avenue, where, you know, as I said, a lot of these folks want to be able to access these shops over here. And right now there's really no safe way to do that. Down in the downtown area, we're looking at bike lanes, and actually, because of this project and some of the other grants that we are working under, we are going to be making a lot of improvements from the train station down to the river, especially along these two parallel streets, Thompson and Anderson, which are going to be reconfigured to be one way in opposite directions, so that traffic flows a little bit more comfortably, I guess, through the area, and makes it safer for adding bike lanes on those streets. And then in this neighborhood, we just sort of mentioned, you know, possibly a bike lane up to the school. Where the bike train comes in, we have a bike path proposed on LabCorp's property. Actually, they're partnering with the town to provide a bike path, and then to continue that path potentially to the school via a multi-use path of some kind. So, you know, we're looking at different ways to just make those connections safer for pedestrians. And then also with, you know, working with the county too, to try to get some sort of path or connection of some kind along the riverfront there too. So lots happening in Raritan. So just from our experience, you know, again, one of the benefits I think was really just getting people together and having the conversations out in the open with their neighbors about the issues in the town, and again, coming together to try to find some solutions. Absolutely having the expert guidance from RideWise on how to perform the audits, and then helping put the data together was a tremendous help. You know, having the data to support these recommendations that we've now made in the plan, you know, we can now go to the town and say, look, we have the evidence here of where there are issues, where people want to be walking, where they're not able to walk because of access or what have you. You know, having that data in hand will really help you with the next step of prioritizing projects with the town, and sort of planning for the next steps. And then, as I said, the firsthand evidence of those issues and opportunities, and then, you know, community building. So, so in terms of the audit, that was our experience. And, you know, please reach out with any questions you might have, that's things I may not have covered here. And then next week, as I said, I'll be talking about the planning part of it. So I think with that, I will hand it back over to Sarah, and thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. That was an amazing presentation. I remember working on those audits, and they were so much fun because it was so ambitious to do like an entire borough in 4 separate audits. And I think it was really successful. The public was really engaged. And like Angela said, with the data collection, what we did on the RideWise end was that we took all those sheets of paper and took all those pictures and made an ArcGIS map of it, and then shared it with Angela so she could easily click through the different points and look at all the different pictures. So I just remember it was like a really fun project. So thank you for that presentation, Angela. Now we're going to go into Walt's presentation on kind of like the county end of things. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the end. So go ahead, Walt.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So hopefully this works. There we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Walt Lane. I'm the Director of Planning here at the county. I've been here a long time, 20 plus years. I started as an intern in 1997. So I have a lot of experience working with a lot of the towns throughout the county on various planning efforts. So I just today want to highlight for anyone who doesn't know what we do, this is our mission statement for the planning board. You know, we really want to make sure we're creating a great community and a great place to live, work, and play in Somerset County, working with our municipal partners to achieve that vision and that goal. So a lot of our work is guided by our Somerset County Master Plan. In 2014, we developed, working hand in hand with each of our 21 municipalities to develop our county investment framework, which is the future land use map for the county. So, and really the goal of this effort was to identify where places in the county growth can occur, where it's encouraged, and where areas in the county where preservation and environmental stewardship are the priorities. So you can see the map. There's 24 priority growth investment areas. They're in purple. And then the green is our priority preservation investment area. And that's where areas that are either permanently preserved, which is the darker green, or targeted for preservation or stewardship activities in the lighter green. So this really guides a lot of our planning work. And in order to advance some of our work, we applied for and received funding from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority to do our walk, bike, hike Somerset County study. So really what today I want to focus on is the importance when you're doing these walkability and bikeability audits is to incorporate them into larger planning efforts so you can secure additional resources to advance the recommendations from that you come out of that audit process. So the purpose of our walk, bike, hike study, as you can see here, was to support walking and biking and hiking opportunities in Somerset County, really making sure we're connecting people and places throughout the county, improving mobility and safety, and also integrating the recommendations of the walk, bike, hike study into the county's preservation plan, which is an ongoing project, which is an update of our open space master plan, our farmland preservation master plan, and for the first time creating a historic preservation element of the county master plan. So really a critical part of the audit process and any planning process is involving the public. So these are just a sampling of some of the opportunities that we had to interact with the public throughout the county during the walk, bike, hike effort. And really doing public engagement either before or after you're doing your walkability audits is critical, either to identify issues that you should be looking at as you go out and you do your audits, or after your audits, ensuring that you didn't miss any of those issues when you're trying to develop your set of recommendations. So you can see we had focus group meetings, we went to community pop-up events, we worked with various groups and different stakeholders. We went senior groups throughout the county. We met with the Somerset County Youth Leadership Council. We attended several English as a second language classes to make sure that we're engaging people that might not normally participate in the planning process. And we had several public meetings that were really critical to gathering input and identifying opportunities as well as concerns during the planning process. So we also used crowdsourcing and social media to gather input. So we had an online survey. We had an online mapping tool that allowed people to go in and put pins in areas where they had concerns about safety for crossing a street, or would like a trail connection from here to here, or this road should have a bike lane. We also had emails, and you can see we got a lot of public comments and responses and issues identified during this process. And you can find the plan, which I'll talk about next week in more detail, on our website, and the link is there. There's a specific page on the county planning site that details the study and the different efforts that went into it. And as you can see, providing opportunities for people to draw on maps and provide comments and provide detail and interact with the great consultant team that we had on this project, led by WSP, and NV5 were part of it, and several other groups, really gathering those input. And then you can see throughout these pictures, being able to draw and put those dots on the map and provide where you would like to, where the public had concerns, is really part of it. And you can see that we went to different events where we, farmers markets and such, to gather input. So all these are critical as when you're doing these these audits for walkability and bikeability. This is just the map that showed all the various improvements that, and recommendations that came out of the public involvement process. You can see that there is a series, really creating the goal of this study was to create a network throughout the county to tie together existing facilities as well as new facilities. So there's over 200 recommendations that came out of the planning process. Another resource that we developed as part of this effort was a design guidebook. And really that was to provide all our planning partners opportunities to see how you could address the various and implement various improvements. So we have cross sections of how you build a shared use path, how sidewalks, intersections, talk about creative placemaking, how you can incorporate those improvements into your recommendations to make sure you're creating a vibrant and an inviting walking and hiking and biking environment throughout the county. There's the placemaking, which is really making sure that when you're creating these areas, and connections for walkability and bike and bicycle facilities, that you can tie them together through creative signage and landscaping and creating opportunities for green infrastructure. So all this came about is because the public is being involved in the planning process. And we also came up with our for the walk, bike, hike for policies. And really that's what I want to kind of highlight today, is that you could see from Angela's presentation that the borough was able to secure funding in Raritan to advance a lot of their local efforts for the good work they're doing, but also being that it was consistent with county work, and being able to show how it's not only advancing local projects and local priorities, but also how it fits into county and regional priorities. And sometimes that may be the difference in getting grant funding. So some of the work that we've done and a lot of the work that the borough did set them up for getting these additional grants, because we could say it's advancing the walk, bike, hike study, it's advancing the supporting priority investment work, and open up those opportunities. And also for the TAP grants and those types of things, by having those recommendations in a county study that's funded by the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, gives it a little an extra edge when funding is very tight and very competitive for those grant programs. So you could see the policies that you want to make sure that you're looking at when you're making your recommendations and identifying issues when you're doing your audits is supporting health and wellness, looking to economic development, tourism, and recreational opportunities and events. It's also supporting your implementation and adoption of complete streets policies at the local level. And then really working with partners. I think that came out through a lot of the different, both presentations today, is getting that collaboration with a cross section of your community. And these are some other people that we want to partner with or recommending working with. You could partner with developers and nonprofits, state and municipal governments, community and citizen advisory groups. And then, making sure that, whatever recommendations that you're developing coming out of these audits are consistent with your local master plan or advanced priorities in your local master plan or other regional plans. So that really will give you the leg up on those funding opportunities when you're looking to implement the planning recommendations that come out of those audits. So I know I went through this really fast, but I want to make sure we had some time for Q&A, and then I'll really get into more of the details and how we came up with the walk, bike, hike recommendations through the planning process at next week's webinar. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and happy to answer any questions on the material I covered.
Great. Thanks, Walt. That was a really great presentation, a nice quick overview. It is almost 5 o'clock. We have a couple minutes, but if people, don't mind staying a couple extra minute or two over, we can do a quick Q&A. We had a few questions come in already. So Mary Jane asks, how can we adapt the community outreach process during a pandemic? It's open to anyone who wants to answer.
I can answer that. So we are dealing with that right now as we do our next study that's being funded by the NJTPA, is a road safety corridor study where we're doing road safety audits. So we're creating opportunities for virtual interaction. So we have a meeting coming up on November 12th at 7 o'clock where it will be a virtual meeting like this. And we'll do a little presentation on the study itself. And then we have breakout rooms where people could talk about the various corridors that we selected to look at in that study in more detail. So really, since we can't get together in those traditional public meeting settings where we're all around the same table, we provided an opportunity for people to provide through the normal process of submitting emails and surveys and that. But we also created an online mapping tool that allow people to provide their comments and that, and all that was taken into account in both the walk, bike, hike, as well as the current road safety study. So it's, but we are also coming up with new ways of doing the road safety audits because they're very similar to the walkability and bikeability audits where you get a group together. So how we propose that we're going to be doing that in this coming spring is we're going to probably, if there's still the restrictions on gatherings of groups, we're going to virtually hold the huddle meeting where we all get everyone together and talk about the quarter that we're going to be doing. And then we'll do it over a course of a couple of days with smaller groups that are socially distant, wearing all the appropriate PPE and such. And then at the end of the week, pull everyone back together virtually and then discuss the findings and share those through that process. So there's ways to address the restrictions and still engage the public, and nothing like using your local website or having these virtual meetings or small group discussions. Maybe you hold it outside when the weather is nicer and people can socially distance in a park. And then there's a lot of different ways to continue to have the public or your team involved in the process, but still being safe.
Great. Yeah, I think that's, something amazing about living in the 21st century is that, we have all these different ways of doing outreach, like right now on this webinar on Zoom, for example. So, it's great that we have these technological ways to continue these process, like moving forward, even when social distancing. Michael asks, Walter, how is implementation and coordination with local municipalities going? Are folks using the design guidebook beyond Raritan?
Yes, and you know, Mike was part of the team that helped develop that awesome guidebook. So we've done a lot of presentations at Planning Partners forums and shared it with Healthier Somerset. So a lot of the ideas that came out of the walk, bike, hike study, as well as the guidebook, it's being used. I can't say if every municipality is using it, but it's definitely been a resource and it's helped inform discussions. You know, I know some of our other towns are using it a little bit more than others, but I think it's been a great resource and, you know, money and time well spent, I think.
We have a question from Mark about Skillman Park in the southern part of the county is stunning, yet it can only be accessed by driving to the park. Is it a priority to link county parks to nearby neighborhoods better?
Yes. So as part of our preservation plan project, one of the, you know, as well as the walk, bike, hike study was to start linking together our various open space amenities, you know, either partnering with our municipalities or looking at county systems to, you know, start connecting those. So one of the big ideas that was in the, what I'll get into next week when we talk about the walk, bike, hike study in more detail was a bigger concept to build off what Raritan's doing along the Raritan River Greenway, to link the Raritan River Greenway through Duke Farms, then look at how we can link Duke Farms to the Sauerland Mountain Preserve, and then how we can link the Sauerland Mountain Preserve to the Lawrence Hopewell Trail system and create a really truly regional trail system that, you know, that you could bike and walk on, you know, from Hopewell and Lawrence all the way up to Raritan and do something in a day like that. So like there's those great opportunities. And part of my goal with that was, since that's also in the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority's area, as well as the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission's area, that my counterparts in Mercer County and I can go to our funding agencies and say, it's serving 2 counties and 2 metropolitan planning organizations. How can you say no to funding when we're looking to construct it? So, you know, that's part of it. The county's goal is to kind of start linking those together. But those concepts are also embedded in the preservation plan, which those draft documents will be released starting later this year for review and public comment. So we definitely welcome the input in that. But that was definitely a priority in that planning process, is to start linking together those parks and providing those opportunities. So.
Great. Thanks, Walt. That sounds like a really exciting project. Can't wait to see where it goes.
Yes, our office is very busy.
So I don't see any more questions. If anyone had a question that didn't get answered, you know, you can always feel free to email me, Sarah at RideWise, SARA, and I can get that to any of our panelists. I'm also going to share my screen just really quickly to kind of put our panelist emails back up there if you want to jot those down. Oh no, I didn't want to do from beginning, from current slide. Okay. So you can feel free to email any of our panelists. I will also include their emails in my follow-up email if you have any extra additional questions that we didn't get to today. And I'll also send a copy of the slides and a recording eventually. So you'll get their emails then as well. And I just want to, you know, do a quick plug for some upcoming webinars that we have. We have, like some of our panelists have mentioned, next week at the same time, November 5th, Walkability and Bikeability Part 2 travel plans. So we will have Walt and Angela coming back to talk a little bit more about the plans that came out of their audit process. And we'll also have Leanne Von Hagen from Voorhees Transportation Center speaking about travel plans and how they relate to public health. And then the week after that, on November 12th at 4 p.m., we'll be having a webinar on community wellness and New Jersey smart workplaces. Municipalities can participate in our New Jersey Smart Workplaces program. Some of our municipalities already do, and it's great. And that can also earn you sustainable Jersey points. And we'll also be talking about mayor's wellness campaigns and other different community wellness initiatives. So thank you everybody for coming today. I'll stop sharing my screen. You can visit our website, ridewise.org, for those links and to register for those upcoming webinars. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to our panelists again for doing such great, amazing presentations. And have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.